Here we go. Okay. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of What a Fustercluck. I am your host, Lolita Keys. And today I have a very special guest who so graciously came on the program, Mr. Dennis Brennan. Hello, Dennis. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I love the name of your podcast. It's certainly unusual.
Very apropos, I think, right?
Yes.
Dennis, love to give a little bit of background on you and then just kind of dive into the conversation. And I think as we sort of move along here, people will get a pretty good idea of what the basis for this conversation is. But as with everything on What a Fustercluck, the idea is to try to make sense of the things that don't really make sense, give people an alternative perspective, something maybe they hadn't thought of before. And I definitely think we're going to get there. But before we do, just a little bit about you. So it's my understanding you are a longtime attorney and political history and commentary writer. You are an author, self-publisher of political analysis books with a primary focus on U.S. political history, legal battles in politics, and what you characterize as lawfare or political persecution. And now, before I tell people the name of some of your published works, one in particular, I do want the audience to get a better sense of who you are, how you got here, how you came to do your writings, the type of person you are, how you arrived at practicing law, and then, of course, later becoming an author. So let's just start at the beginning. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up in particular, and sort of who were your childhood heroes.
Yeah, I grew up it's a small suburb, Marionette Park, just on the border of Chicago.
Nice.
Chicago's broken up into 50 wards. We are on the very end of the 19th ward. It's such a small town. It's basically, about 4 or 5 blocks each way, surrounded by cemeteries and then the Chicago area. That was a good place to grow up, actually.
Yeah.
Everybody knew everybody. You only had about, I think, 2,300 people in the town.
Mm.
You had, just alone on my block, there's like 24 houses. And just in my age group, a year ahead of me, a year behind me, there had to be 40 kids that were that age. That was just the era. Everybody had kids. We had 5 in our house, but some had 6,
Yeah.
some had less. But that's where I grew up. There was one small store that, you went to for necessities, grocery store, a gas station. Otherwise, you had to go into Chicago. And back then, you didn't have the 2-car family.
Yes.
Most moms were at home.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a good way of living. I mean, there was always somebody watching you in a way.
Yeah.
You couldn't go too far.
Yep.
Your neighbors were also kind of your extra parents.
Yes.
Keep you in line. And they kind of did. So it was a good place to grow up. I think, we had the baseball fields, little league fields, just about 3 blocks away. So, myself, my brothers played baseball. Almost everybody did.
Yeah. American pastime.
American pastime. And we weren't playing in league games.
Mm-hmm.
We were at the end of the block making our own slow pitch baseball or playing against the school. The school was right down the street from me. So, for kindergarten through 8th grade.
I love that.
Walked to school. Everybody walked to school. There was no busing, anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
It was years later where they started to, other schools in the district to bus people because they were just running out of students.
Yeah.
In my age group, there were so many, but it started tailing off.
Yeah.
So, but it was a good place to grow up. It was, I'd say, nobody had money. If you did, there weren't really. I think one friend of mine, his dad was a professional. Everybody else was, like my dad worked in a warehouse.
Yep.
There were truck drivers, manual labor. You had a few plumbers or, electricians, but it wasn't the upper middle class or even middle class, I'd say.
Yeah. Blue collar.
Right. But
Sounds
we didn't
like
know.
A good old hometown America.
Right.
Yeah.
Nobody knew. We were probably poor, but we didn't know it.
Yep.
You didn't go on vacation.
Yeah.
If you did, that was weird.
Yeah.
Or they went, someone would go to Indiana every year to their grandpa's farm or something. But I didn't go anywhere. So
Yeah. I love that though, because you're far enough, but close enough to a major city that you can
Mhm.
kind of see the hustle and bustle, but then you're in your small town kind of bubble, very blue collar, traditional American pastime, just growing up with your buddies, hanging out. It's very Sandlot-esque, if you know that movie, is kind of
Yes.
the vibe I'm getting, and I definitely love that. I think that speaks to a lot of people who've had that same kind of lived experience and certainly very different from how kids grow up today. Absolutely. Which again takes me back to sort of who were some of your childhood heroes?
We were super involved in the sports. If we
Hmm.
weren't playing it, we were watching it.
Yeah.
And even if we weren't any good, we had so many kids,
Hmm.
they would have ice at the end of the block by the
Yeah.
school that they filled up, an ice rink of some sort. I mean, dirt was the actual rink, so I'm not sure that's called a rink, but
You
but
make
we
the
play
most of it.
hockey. Yeah, we play hockey. There's basketball, baseball. We were always doing something.
Hmm.
And because there were so many people growing up at the same time,
Hmm.
they never were really bored. You found
Awesome.
something to do.
Nice.
But that meant our heroes were basically sports,
Yeah.
people.
I love
You
that though. Hard work.
right. So we all thought we'd be the next, Bobby Hull or Dick Butkus or,
Yeah.
a little older Dick Allen was playing for the White Sox. And
Hmm.
you had the battles. We had Cub fans and Sox fans, even though we were
Hmm.
South Side.
Yeah.
And, so you'd argue over which team was better, even
Oh
though
yeah.
both teams were pretty bad back then.
Yeah.
We still would argue it like it made any sense.
Yeah. Well,
So,
growing up in the tri-state area, I can tell you I know that battle all too well with the Mets and the Yankees. So
yeah,
that's one of my favorite things about Chicago is just how kind of reminiscent it is of New York, but in the middle of the country there.
right. So, you had this thought about sports heroes, I think, because especially as young boys, you think that's what I'm going to do. The
Hmm.
realization hits you at some point.
Yeah.
You're not playing.
What's your backup plan?
Right. You better have one. You know,
Exactly. Exactly.
Luckily, we did a lot of reading. I mean, my parents
Mm.
were both they're both immigrants from Ireland.
Hmm.
So my mom especially, but my dad too, wanted us to do better, wanted us to study,
Yeah.
really pushed that you had to do your homework, your classwork, and reading even outside of school. So I would read about presidents and, Abe Lincoln.
I love
That
it.
really appealed because, the whole log cabin thing and,
Yes.
an attorney
Hmm.
and of course the hero in an Irish Catholic family, JFK. I mean,
Yes.
you had a photo of him somewhere in the house
Oh yeah.
along with
Yeah.
the Pope.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. You're checking all the bases.
right, there's just no doubt you're going to have that there, and you know, so yeah, you looked up to those people and you thought, wow,
Yeah.
those guys became president.
Yep. Some powerful people to look up to there for sure. And I think it's interesting too, because I don't know that you see as much of that these days, just the consistency in, again, just kind of the way you grew up, your household, the Pope, the president, right? And
Hmm.
even, things like reading. I just was listening to something recently that talked about, you know, you had to go to the library to learn about something. You had to learn it in school. You had to read books on your own. You didn't have Google at your fingertips. So you really sort of had to put in the work to do the
Yeah.
research. And so typically, I think that meant your retention was probably stronger and also your your ability to kind of ignite your passion because unless it's related to school, if it's really for pleasure and you're going out of your way to sort of learn about it, you obviously have an interest in it. And I really truly believe that you probably retain a lot more than kids do now because information just comes so rapidly. Anything you want to know, you look it up in a few seconds and then you're on to the next thing. And that's one thing that I try to be cognizant of, even raising kids today, is just the importance of reading, understanding what you read, reading to comprehend, and just going the extra mile and not necessarily always relying on that technology. Another question that comes to mind is just what were the politics of your household or even the town where you grew up in general? I know for me, I grew up in a very blue collar community and it was majority Democrat. At least that's what it seemed to me at the time. That's who typically got voted in. What was your
Yeah.
experience like as a kid and how much did you really know about politics?
Yeah, I do quite a bit because we had um, when my parents first moved to Marina Park, they had moved into an area that was mostly Republican, even though that's just the way it was there for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
And my father at that time was working in a
Mm-hmm.
warehouse, but he was always voting Democrat. And a
Mm,
funny story about it is he went to vote for the first time after living in Chicago, and he was a
mm-hmm.
union guy working in a warehouse,
Mm.
the Teamsters Union, and
Wow.
he asked for a Democrat ballot, and the guy judge or whatever there said, "We vote Republican out here," and and he got mad.
Yeah,
He
good for
wanted
him.
he wanted a Democrat ballot, and
Mm,
you know, over time, he had lost that job, and he went to work for the county, a patronage job.
mm-hmm.
So he ended up working in the precinct. Chicago's well known for that, and Cook County,
Mm-hmm.
precinct captains.
Nice.
So he became the precinct captain there,
Very good.
and he did it mostly though for the job. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
sure, he'd still be a Democrat if he was
Yeah.
alive. Who
Yeah.
knows? Um, so I think it was to make sure we could all eat. With
Mm-hmm.
5 kids,
Yep.
but he always voted Democrat. So he, actually would go out and knock on doors, and sometimes one of us would go with. I ended up liking doing it, so I'd go out there with him, and he asked people to vote for these candidates. And you know, the funny thing is, the Democrats, at least in the Chicago area, would always push a slate. Like they want all these candidates. And
Mm.
you're dealing with some Republicans there who had been all voting Republican, but they knew him.
Yeah.
And, I remember one of the best responses was someone said, I can't vote for these guys. And my dad said, well, can you vote for the guy's name was Harry Busharell. He was
Mm-hmm.
the local Democrat. He's the one that had gotten him the job. And the voter said, "Well, yeah, if it's important to you and your job, yeah, I'll do that. I'll do,
Oh, I love
I'll
that.
vote for him, but the rest of them, I'm not voting for." And
Yeah.
that's I don't. That's fine. I
You
don't
got to
care.
draw the line somewhere,
Right. I mean, the
right?
idea, and truthfully, Urel and most of these local guys, they cared about themselves.
Yeah.
It's if
Mm-hmm.
I get elected is what matters, not who the
Mm-hmm.
president is,
Mm-hmm.
because you really
Yeah.
can't affect that much knocking on someone's door.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
even then,
Yeah,
you
and what
really
kind of an agenda are you kind of pushing through? I just released an episode today where I talked about people getting more involved at the local level. We put so much emphasis on the presidential election. Obviously, it's got the biggest hoopla and fanfare, but
yeah,
things really start too at your local level and getting people more involved. And I think a lot of entrepreneurial people get driven into those positions, and sometimes for the wrong reasons. Sometimes it's because they're impacted some way in their business, and so they want to get in to be able to do the things they can do that are good for their business, maybe not so great for the community. So it's hard to kind of flesh people out, but I appreciate the knocking on doors. Another funny thing is in the town where I grew up, my uncle was actually the mayor for many years. And
okay.
I just remember we would have to put the signs in the front yard for him. My uncle Dominic, of course, couldn't be in the family if you didn't have the signs out in the front yard. you'd be you'd be disowned pretty quickly. Um, but I remember that people going door to door, and I just feel like you do not see that these days because, of course, people use social media amongst other outlets. But there's something to be said when you're in a smaller community, especially, and your neighbors and you know what they're doing, and you have a little bit of a better sense of who they are and kind of what their values are, what they do for a living. So I think that must have, I mean, it certainly speaks to me knowing the books that you've written and your career from the conversation you and I had when we first met, how going door to door with your dad, like what an experience that must have been. And it's very interesting because it really teaches you what rejection looks like too, and how to handle different personalities and getting doors closed in your face or potentially, being insulted, who knows. But at the end of the day, it's every one person that you can get to listen to you could really change a vote. So I think that's pretty awesome.
Well, it is, and it's I ended up several years later,
Mm-hmm.
running for village trustee there, which
Mm.
village trustees like aldermen, it's just a
Yep.
nuance in some of these places,
Mm-hmm.
and winning. And one of the things that was funny, My dad, a lot of in Cook County, a lot of the precinct captains would stand outside the polling place
Hmm.
and hand out things. But he had kind of a deal with the Republican
Hmm.
that neither one was really going to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was rare, but when I ran, I had people standing outside the polling places, including myself. And I think he surprised people by standing out there with me in his precinct.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
and by that time, it had changed. It had become more Democrat,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
over
Hmm.
the course of time. I don't know if it was him working it
Hmm.
or demographics, people moving in, people
Hmm.
moving out.
Yep.
Maybe a little of both. But
Yes.
it certainly showed me when I ran. I knocked on doors to the point where I'd knock on everyone's door.
Yeah.
And it was unsophisticated. I
Hmm.
had the list of voters,
Yeah.
but I didn't have I didn't think of, does this person actually vote in the election? Just because they're
Right.
listed, I went anyhow.
Yeah. You never
And,
know.
and I remember one woman telling me, "You've been here 3 times. We're voting for you. You don't have to keep coming back." And I went,
That's
okay.
amazing. Yeah.
But,
Hey, this is what it's all about.
right. But in a small town, I won by 25 votes. I'd like
Yeah.
to think if I didn't bother those people,
Yeah.
25 of them wouldn't have shown up.
It
You
makes a
know?
difference. Every vote makes a difference. So I think that's awesome. And again, I think it really just speaks to sort of the hustle bustle, the nitty gritty, getting down, to business and doing what you need to do, getting out there. It's important for people to see your face, hear from you, and see you out there doing the work. I think it also gives people the sense that, all right, if he's willing to do this, hopefully he'll be willing to go to work for me too, right? Once you're officially
Right.
elected.
And then
So,
they kind of connect with you. So,
mm,
when you're in the neighborhood,
mm-hmm,
and there was some issue that came up about there was a cemetery and
mm-hmm,
a prairie, and I was walking down one of the only main streets,
yeah.
and what we used to call the busy street. And a guy, yelled out from his house to me, and I'm like, uh-oh. you know,
Oh God, yeah.
'Cause I was still relatively young. I was in my
Mm-hmm.
20s.
Mm-hmm.
And I went over and talked to him, and he said, I have this problem. The cemetery owned the prairie.
Mm-hmm.
All these weeds are growing up, and it affects our allergies. And
Mm.
I've asked the mayor, I've asked this trustee, that trustee, can you do something about it?
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking, I don't know.
But I'll
they
try.
could they couldn't do anything, but all right. I said, I'll see. And
Yeah.
I just wrote a letter to the cemetery saying, here's the problem. There's an ordinance, you're supposed to do that. Can you fix it? I didn't realize it, but I sent the letter. It might have just been by accident,
Mm-hmm.
but the next day they were out there cutting it down. And this guy was telling everybody, the only guy that would do that was Dennis Brennan. He
I
called
love
me.
that.
And I'm like,
See?
I'm not sure if I did it or not, but I'll take
Doesn't matter. Yeah. Perception is everything, right?
credit.
And honestly, the squeaky wheel gets the oil, just like you were going door to door and you finally got that person to say, you've been here 3 times. I'm voting for you. All
Yeah.
this guy cared about is having his voice heard and then seeing some action. And I think that's what a lot of us want. Even in the political climate of today, I think it doesn't matter how evolved we become. That's really what we're looking for in anybody that we bring into office is we want to see change happening, even if it's small and incremental. We want to see action. And when we don't, that's when things can take a turn. And I'm getting pretty excited here to start talking about your book, but we're not there quite yet. One more thing I want to touch on before we get into the book
Sure.
is your law career. So I think everybody has a pretty good sense of how you grew up, influences, et cetera, et cetera. But what was it that really drove you to law coming from the household that you came from? What made you decide, I'm going to go ahead and be a lawyer?
I think it was always ingrained in our heads.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the second of five. My older brother is really just 13 months older than me.
Mm.
So my mother, especially with us two,
Yeah.
would always push the idea that you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a lawyer. Hard suggestions.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
this is, the public. We went to a public grade school, but
Mm-hmm.
high school, you're going to the Catholic high school, which is a very good high school.
Yeah.
The other one, it's too much stuff going on.
Mm-hmm.
So she was really into the whole education idea, and that's the way you
Yes.
better yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So that was ingrained. And she was kind of picking out those things. Now, I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't going along with the idea of being a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
My older brother was, so I was a year behind. So I was in college. I intended to be a journalist. I took journalism and I thought, well, that's what I'm going to do. But
Mm-hmm.
I agreed, all right, I'll go take the LSAT test for law school just
Mm-hmm.
in case, because I don't
Yeah.
have a job.
Yeah.
I was working part-time while I was going to school,
Mm-hmm.
at a grocery store to make money. But I
Yeah.
I thought, well, I'll take it. It can't
Mm-hmm.
hurt.
Mm-hmm.
I did do that.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, then I was encouraged to apply to law schools.
Yes. Yes.
Why not? And
Yeah.
then, when my shock of being a journalist turned out to be like two job offers, one in
Mm.
Iowa and one in Arkansas, and I think each of them uh, paid, like, one paid 9,000 and one paid 13,000.
For
Now
the
I was
year we're talking.
a year, right?
Yep.
And I was working part time at a grocery store, at a union grocery store,
Mm-hmm.
working part time, making 14,000.
Yeah.
I thought, well,
Yep.
not only did my mom teach me that I should read, I learned some math along the way. And I thought, wait a minute, how am I'm living at home making
Yeah.
14. If I live in one of these places,
Mm-hmm.
how am I even going to make it? You know
Yes.
what? That law school thing's sounding better.
Yep.
I did think, after law school, I can still do journalism because
Mm-hmm.
now they'll really like me.
Oh,
I was very
yes.
naive, but I thought I'll get a much better job.
Yeah. I mean, but it's funny because Megyn Kelly started out as a
Yeah,
lawyer
yeah,
and then went on to news and journalism. So it really is kind of a good fit there, really. So I don't think you were crazy to think it.
yeah. There have been people that have done that, and we
Mm-hmm.
had uh, we had a local broadcaster here, Bill Curtis, who
Mm-hmm.
was in the news, who was a lawyer. So
Mm.
I thought, yeah, that made sense.
Yep.
Now, you know, I don't know how realistic it was or not, but I did like the law too. So
Mm-hmm.
after graduating from law school, you got to take the bar exam and all that
Yeah.
stuff. But I found practicing law to be interesting because
Yeah.
it's something different. It does
Yes.
engage you, and over the course of time, I've practiced divorce law, corporate law, real estate,
Mm.
civil litigation.
Mm-hmm.
I did a little criminal, but not much.
Mm-hmm.
One that I did was a DUI for a guy, and
Oh.
I was in front of the judge, and I talked to the client, and you're supposed to prepare the client, you're told, and
Mm-hmm.
I thought I had, and I asked him the questions, like, to make sure that he hadn't been drinking, because that's what he was telling me.
Sure.
I was naive, of course
Yeah.
he was drinking, and, and so I asked the question,
Yeah.
were you, when it was his turn,
Mm-hmm.
did you drink at all? And he stops. He said, "Oh yeah, I did.
Oh God.
I I had two drinks. So when it's over, I know it's
Uh,
lost."
yeah.
The judge says to me, he
No coming back from that.
he took great pity on me. He
Yeah.
said, "Counselor,"
Rookie mistake.
he said, "it's not your fault. There's only so much you can do with some clients.
Yeah.
You're going to learn that."
Yep.
And
Exactly. Trial
I
and
thought,
error.
yeah, I
Mm.
won't ask that question again. I didn't do many DUIs after that anyhow, but I found, in talking to other attorneys, the argument is, every defendant will say or tell the police, I had two drinks.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah.
somehow that's a magic number that's
Yep.
okay.
Yeah. Just a couple.
Right. Rather
Hmm.
than saying I had zero.
Yep.
If you're going to
Exactly.
lie,
Yep.
you, lie straight down the line and say zero, officer. Why?
Yeah.
I'm not going to
Yeah.
say two.
I
And
know. I know. That's funny. And so you basically made the defense for the prosecution, right?
yes.
You
And
basically just gave the case with the
yes.
question that, yeah, behind closed doors, he tells you one thing, but everything happens for a reason, as they say. So that's funny. So of all the law you've practiced, did you have a favorite? Was there one in particular that you thought, ooh, this is really like feeding me and I really am enjoying this one? Or was it kind of across the board?
Yeah, I worked for government for a while, and
Mm,
one of the things, working with legislation, you know,
wow.
uh, drafting legislation, reviewing it,
Mm-hmm.
I found that to be arguing. There
Mm,
was a state rep at the time. He later became a state senator, and when I was
mm-hmm.
working for the state of Illinois,
Mm-hmm.
he had written up a bill a proposal, and he thought it would stop interest on all kinds of loans. And
Mm.
I went from Chicago to Springfield. It's about 3.5 hours, along with my boss,
Hmm.
to tell him why it was a mistake, that it wasn't going to do what he thought it was going to do. And he said, walk with me. And we were walking with him, and we're down in the tunnel by the cafeteria, and we're trying to explain this isn't going to work. We have all these statutes that you're not going to be able to cap interest. They're separate.
Okay.
And he looks at me and he said, well, can't we just say it does? Well,
Oh.
just, and that really made me think, well,
Hmm.
these guys really don't care
No.
about, doing the right thing. They just care that they can have a press release or have a
Yep.
news conference,
Yes.
and I looked at him and said, you can do anything you want.
Hmm.
You're the state rep. It's your bill.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you it's not going to work.
Hmm.
And I still talk to my old boss about that. We still
Hmm.
chuckle about how silly
Yeah.
to hear an elected official who rose to a pretty high spot within the General Assembly didn't
Again,
really care.
yeah, perception is everything. If you
Yeah.
just want to get the headline, this is one of my biggest points of frustration lately too, is speaking of legislation, it's just all the things that get baked into these bills that go up for votes. And some of them just have absolutely nothing to do with the basis of the bill, but it's like a favor that you're kind of sliding in there for whatever lobbyist or whomever is trying to get something done. And first of all, it's reassuring to know that there's people like you on the other end that are calling these things out. But then it just kind of adds to the mistrust of government that is just rampant today, right? Because what do you
Mhm.
believe and what's really true, what's really not? Because it really is all about the clickbait. It really is all about the headline. So that's interesting, and I'm not surprised that that was kind of the one that you selected, given your career in law and just your background on politics and everything else. So I think this is actually the perfect time to segue into your book.
Sure.
So the name of the book is DC Swamp Strikes Back: Aaron Burr, Donald Trump, and Their Similar Battles. So tell me about this book. The title obviously says a lot, but what was the moment when you discovered the parallels between Aaron Burr and Donald Trump that prompted you to want to write this book?
A friend of mine wrote a book, which I reference in my book,
Mm-hmm.
Lloyd Boterney. He's a Democrat consultant for political campaigns. He's done big races in the states here
Mm-hmm.
and in congressional races all over the country. Bright guy. He wrote a book. He gave it to me to read
Mm-hmm.
after it was published, and I said, I looked through it. And as I'm reading it, I'm realizing, hey, I don't know that much about Aaron Burr, because his
Mm-hmm.
book was solely about Aaron Burr.
Yeah.
And as I'm reading it, I'm like, wow, I know he had this duel with Alexander Hamilton.
Yep.
Well, I don't know a lot of this other stuff, or I don't remember it.
Mm-hmm.
And, as I read it, I'm like, wow, this guy had a tough time with the media
Mm-hmm.
back then, what
Mm-hmm.
the media was,
Mm-hmm.
and he had a tough time with the Washington insiders. And every page, it seemed like that seemed to be the case.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, okay, good. It was a good book.
Yeah.
But when he came back, I couldn't help myself. But when in my review, you want to
Yep.
know what I thought?
Mm-hmm.
I told him, great book, but I think you missed the real story.
Yeah, the
And
parallel.
right.
Drawing the
I said,
parallel.
I
Yeah.
think I think the way Trump and Washington have kind of coexisted, if you want to call it
Mm-hmm.
that,
Mm-hmm.
is very similar to Burr.
Mm-hmm.
And whether you're pro-Trump, anti-Trump, you should be able to look at it and go, wow, this guy's battled with the media. He's battled with his own party. He's
Yeah.
battled with the other party. And that's Aaron Burr's story. And I said, you really should do a follow-up. And he said, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
I think that
I,
would be bad for his business. But
yeah.
I thought, I told him, well, I'm going to do it then.
Yeah.
I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
write the book. I think I can, you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
and so I'm going to give it a chance. And he probably thought, no, you're not,
But you
because
did.
he told me it took him 3 years to write the book. And I thought,
Yeah.
I'm
It's
not
a
going to
lot of
spend
research.
3 years. Yeah, I said, I'm not spending 3 years on this.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have to go a little quicker. But,
Mm-hmm.
I understand to dig up all the stuff on Aaron Burr,
Yeah.
that he really did put a lot of time into it. And I think there was just that parallel reading that. And then I had asked a business partner of mine what he thought because he read it. I said, "Do you think I'm right or wrong?" And he said,
Hmm.
"No, I think the same thing after reading it.
Yeah.
That's what he should have written." But it's all perspective. If you come from that, some people might look at it and go, "Well, no, Burr suffered, but Trump didn't."
Well,
Trump
we'll get to
caused
that. We'll get to that. So I think it's interesting to point out history repeats itself. And I think
it.
that's one of the interesting takeaways from your book is it's a clear indication history does indeed repeat itself. I think so many people nowadays talk about, oh, politics is awful. It didn't used to be this way. But I saw some political flyers from that era, from the Alexander Hamilton era, where they would call each other out for being adulterous men, right? Or
Yes.
having diseases. And I mean, just all kinds of crazy things they would put up on in papers, on flyers that they would paste up all over the town. So this is nothing new. I think Trump is just such a controversial figure and different from sort of the mold of what politicians look like over the course of the last 100 years, let's say, or to be fair, 60, 70 years maybe, that we all have this idea of what they should look like. Now, when you go back to the founders, you're talking about a group of folks that were a lot more renegade minded, doing something new, right? So over time, you start to see what does the presidential mold look like. But for them, they were kind of sort of the Trumps of their era, right? So for
Yeah.
people who don't know, talk a little bit more about Burr, who he was, what he's
Yeah.
known for, and then we'll get
Yeah.
into the Trump side.
Yeah. I mean, Burr is an interesting fella. I mean, he kind of, I wouldn't say, like Trump really
Mm-hmm.
was a celebrity. We didn't have celebrities really back then, or at least,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I can't find any mention of being a celebrity.
Mm-hmm.
But Burr was a guy who, came from a well-to-do family. His father started Princeton University. He
Mm.
was thought of as a brilliant lawyer, and he nobody knew really politically where he stood.
Mm-hmm.
Was he with the Adams group, or was he
Yep.
with Jefferson?
Mm-hmm.
And which is kind of interesting. And there's a parallel there, I think. But
Yeah.
he was a guy who put a lot of work into those elections.
Mm-hmm.
Surprisingly, like I
Mm-hmm.
think people didn't think of him as this mastermind, strategist.
Mm.
But I credit him for getting Jefferson elected when in Jefferson's first election. Just looking at all the research,
Yeah.
Jefferson ran against Adams the first time
Mm-hmm.
with Burr as his vice president, who was handpicked by the party.
Mm-hmm.
Jefferson really didn't
Mm-hmm.
have anything to do with it. And he was because he made a great speech. And they thought, oh, this guy is really good on his feet. And
Yep.
we're going to put him in there. He's going to be an asset to Jefferson, who,
Mm-hmm.
who probably could have had anybody as vice president, but
Yeah. Yeah.
but they decided they really wanted to win. And you've got Jefferson against Adams.
Mm-hmm.
We've complained in my lifetime about the candidates.
Yep.
Can't we get better candidates?
I know.
Imagine living then. You're like Jefferson or Adams. I
Yeah.
don't know. This is
Yeah.
going to be a tough one. That could be like you go into the polling place and actually decide there.
Yes.
Because now we kind of decide,
Oh
most of
yeah.
us decide as soon as we know who's running. That's the
Exactly.
guy.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So, yeah, so Burr, though, after they lost the first election
Mm-hmm.
and they had a different system, so Jefferson had the second highest vote total and became the vice president.
Mm-hmm.
Thank God they changed that.
Yeah.
I can't imagine
No.
now with the candidates, hey, no president would give our current vice presidents anything to do anyhow.
Exactly.
In the other party, they'd have no chance. So
Mm-hmm.
they would probably be inside just trying to beat the president, sniping
Exactly. Exactly.
I mean, so, but while Jefferson served as vice president for Adams in that term,
Mm-hmm.
Burr went back to New York, and this is where I really give him credit. He turned the General Assembly in New York
Mm-hmm.
to his side so
Mm-hmm.
that they would support Jefferson.
Mm-hmm.
He did that through elections, and that is the difference. All those back then, the electoral votes were based on how your General Assembly decided.
Mm-hmm.
So they went with, Jefferson in the election, Jefferson Burr.
Mm-hmm.
They switched from Adams, and all of a sudden, we have a victory. Uh,
Amazing. Yeah.
but Burr couldn't help himself. He's always going to be around controversy. He did so well. He tied Jefferson in the election, and
Mm-hmm.
again, we don't have this anymore.
Yes.
But the founders didn't do everything right. There's a few things they had to fix, and
Yeah.
these are some of the technical changes.
Mm-hmm.
So that vote had to go into the Congress for a vote.
Mm-hmm.
And Burr technically could have been president.
Yeah. Can you believe it?
I know that'd be amazing.
I
And
know.
and at the same time, it caused a lot of friction with the Jefferson people.
Yes.
So because they felt Burr should have done everything he could to make sure they don't
Mm-hmm.
vote for him,
Mm-hmm.
he didn't. He went back to New York and didn't do anything, which
Yeah.
is kind of on point for him. That's the way he kind of did things. But I'd like to think that if I was Burr, I would have said no, vote for Jefferson. I'm the vice president. But
Yeah. Not
but
so
you also
much.
you have the politics, as you
Mm-hmm.
kind of mentioned
Mm-hmm.
before. These are while there's a lot of great men in those times,
Mm-hmm.
there are also bitter people who can think very small and
Yes.
vindictively. And
Mm-hmm.
Jefferson, while loved by many of us now,
Mm-hmm.
wasn't universally loved.
Nope. I know. And a lot of
And
people don't know that. It's all the way the story is kind of painted. And in the end, for Burr, it was a duel. I mean, can you
yeah.
imagine Trump in a duel? Yeah.
No, well, he might imagine that, but
I
no,
know.
I don't think
Yeah.
that'd be a good idea.
Exactly. But this is what we're talking about, a difference in time. What a difference, a couple hundred years makes, right? This
Right.
is unfortunately the end for him. And it's interesting with everything that's going on now, especially with this current situation with the war in Iran, depending on what happens here. Trump, in my opinion, has not seen the end of political persecution. And so what are some, as far as the book goes too, and what we see in media today, what role would you say media plays in shaping political reputations?
Yeah. I mean, I think, I learned early it plays a huge role in local politics. Like I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
I had been a village trustee, I'd been a township collector, I was on a library board,
Mm-hmm.
school board.
Mm-hmm.
And, early in my career, I had gotten kind of into some fights with the media, the
Mm-hmm.
local, to the
Yeah.
point where I started my own newspaper. Boy,
Good.
I'm a sore loser. If you're gonna
If you
if
don't
you're
want
gonna
to write it, I'll write it myself.
right, I'll tell you what really happened.
Uh-huh.
But the saying was, never pick a fight with a man who buys ink by the barrel. And I picked a few of those fights, and I saw other people, allies, who were good public servants, who were doing a good job,
Mm-hmm.
but because, especially with the written word,
Mm.
just a word here or there can change things in people's minds.
Yes.
They have a negative view of that person,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
so they can frame your whole career. They can ruin your career,
Yeah, the
and
pen is mightier than the sword, as they say.
it is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's difficult, but I've seen some people propped up too, where you
Mm-hmm.
find out later
Yeah.
they were really just paper lions. They didn't have
Yeah.
anything behind them.
Mm-hmm.
Empty suits is, I guess, what they used to say they are.
Yeah.
And you talk to those people, kind of like when I mentioned the state rep. There's a guy who I had thought was pretty bright,
Mm-hmm.
and he's telling me that it doesn't really matter as long as he passes something. I thought, ooh,
Yeah.
that's not someone I want to think of as a good public servant.
No.
And so I think, yeah, the media can really crush you.
Yes.
It's changing a little bit now because, like Elon Musk said, we are the news. It's
Yes.
everybody is the news, but I don't know if that's good or bad because you have, people spreading their news, like when you
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
mentioned back in the early days where
Mm-hmm.
they could say anything.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
he's got a STI, or he's
Yep.
he's having an affair,
Yeah.
and now there's some of that stuff that goes out on social media, and you're like, is that true?
I know.
I have to look it up.
You do. And that's so important. I'm so glad you said that because that's that's where we were then, but I think people probably took a lot more at face value. One of the beautiful things that's happening now as far as is this good, is this bad, is obviously corruption runs deep and it made its way to the media. Just like everything else where there's big money, there is corruption. And so one of the things that I love about what's happening now is it seems that the voice is being given back to the people more. You sort of can't escape it. On the flip side of that, though, because news moves so rapidly and quicker than ever before, people are, they will forget something relatively quickly as well, unless it supports their agenda. In that case, they hold on to it forever, right? I always laugh when I hear people talk about Trump and his like fraternizing with women or whatever. And I'm just like, has everyone forgotten about Bill Clinton? I mean, the hypocrisy just runs so deep because people are so steadfast in their ideology. And again, I said this at the top of the show, but this is one of the reasons that I started this podcast is because not even just in politics, but abound. We are just so programmed to be in our little bubbles, follow our little tribe, that we forget to consider alternate perspectives. And so that's really important to me. And so I am glad to see more of the people's voices being heard. But with that said, it's very important that we do things like fact check, which is another sort of cliche term, like have you fact checked that? But it really is important. You cannot take anything at face value, no matter what news source it comes from. And I tell people, just like their stocks, you should diversify your news sources, right? If you
Yes.
really want to get the full story, honestly, that's what's helped me so much over these last, I'd say, I don't know, 10 years is diversifying my news sources because you will hear one, political leaning journalist say one thing so vehemently and then you hear the flip side of that and it's like, "Oh my gosh, I never would have known that." And I would have been so hung up on this and just so politically outraged, I wouldn't have even explored it. But that's the difficult thing is trying to get everybody to think like that, and it's certainly not an easy task. But I one of the things I love about your book is again, it reminds us that history does repeat itself. We all are so hung up on this has never happened before. We're in the worst of times, yet we all have Amazon, dropping packages off at our front door 24 hours after we ordered something, right? And so you got to kind of take the good with the bad, but I think it's a good refresher that we have been here before. We have seen this before. What are your thoughts on Trump derangement syndrome?
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it would be interesting to find out was there something similar to this. But
Yeah.
when people, I mean, I guess similar, yes. I'm
Mm-hmm.
just in the time that I've been around. If you go back to when you really start thinking about it, the people that were anti-Obama were really anti-Obama. The
Yeah.
people that were anti, Reagan.
Mm-hmm.
Reagan was the big one.
Yeah.
I one of the things that really stuck with me with Reagan was, hey, I'm not proud about this, but in that election, that was my first presidential election,
Mm-hmm.
and I voted for John Anderson, who
Oh my
had
gosh.
no chance. It
No.
tells you, what kind of political nut are you that you would vote for this guy? But the reason is at that time the media was. I knew Carter was doing a bad job.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I was
Oh,
alive. I
yeah.
realized how bad things were,
Mm-hmm.
but they were depicting Reagan as a guy who was going to start a war, blow up
Mm-hmm.
the world. And I
Mm-hmm.
was young, and I'm thinking, well, I don't want that. I
Nope.
don't, you
Yeah.
know, you're going
Yeah.
to be fighting some, World War III
Yeah.
at that time, the Soviets.
Yep.
And, that was like a lesson learned, though. I realized 4 years later, like, boy, they're nuts. This isn't,
Yeah. It's the
it's
fear
not going to happen.
tactics, the fear
Right.
mongering. Yes. I mean,
And we
honestly, that's the best place to get people. Get them afraid.
right. And I think both sides use this,
Absolutely.
everything's the worst.
Mm-hmm.
George, right after Reagan, you had George H.W. Bush,
Yep.
who I think really
Mm-hmm.
did a great job,
Mm-hmm.
but, he lost sight of the fact the economy, what was It's the economy, stupid, was the
Yep.
slogan.
Yes.
Things, for a lot of people, things were fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we had basically crushed communism. He got
Mm-hmm.
no credit for that
No, I know.
because people were looking at, what they perceived as an economy that was starting to trail off or something.
Yes. And
It
that's
wasn't
what people
picking
care
up.
about at the end of the day
It,
is how
yeah,
is this impacting the bottom line? Because again, the majority of this country is just working people, right? Many, 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 many just living paycheck to paycheck. And
right.
so that's where their focus is really going to be, not on, global affairs and another war or whatever have you. It's funny, the very first book report I ever wrote was on Patrick Buchanan.
Oh, okay.
For whatever reason, I gravitated towards him and his messaging. I mean, I don't even remember how old I was, but it was a very elementary book report, if you will. So I doubt I said anything really impactful, but for some reason I just liked the guy. I don't even
Yeah.
know what it was, but that was the first book report I had ever written. And, it is what it is. But I will say, Trump has definitely brought a whole new level of, again, Trump derangement syndrome, the actual true just utter hatred. And in my opinion, which is again why I appreciate your book, in my lifetime, I have never seen anything quite like this, where there is so much disdain for someone that you can't even see the good. Like, for instance, I wanted to ask you, like, what are some of the things you think he's done well in this term, and what are some things that you would like to see him have done differently so far? Because for
Yeah.
me, closing the border was huge.
Right. I mean, the thing they said couldn't be done, which,
Mm-hmm.
most of us knew that could be done. I
Yeah.
mean, you're purposely keeping it open,
Mm-hmm.
and that's silly.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, Trump closed the border. I think
Mm-hmm.
everyone agrees he did that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure that the people that hate him so much that that's a good thing for them. I
Mm-hmm.
mean,
Mm-hmm.
and I think there's things. I think the economy was really starting to pick up here. I'm a
Yeah.
little worried. I'm a little worried.
Me too.
Venezuela was a surprise.
Yeah.
Although, I do look at it like, wow, if you are successful, and
Mm-hmm.
to me, part of that success is not only that Maduro's gone, which he is,
Mm-hmm.
but that you actually have an election there and the people in Venezuela decide
Mm-hmm.
who's going to lead them.
Yeah.
I don't, you know, this, the vice president they put in as president,
Mm-hmm.
she probably turned on Maduro. That's how it happened.
Oh yeah. Come
And
on.
saved her own skin.
Yes.
But I'm not sure we should reward that behavior.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, if you can win, you can win.
Yeah.
If you can't,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
then Iran, the same thing. I think people are worried about that. That's
Yes.
that's been a problem. Well, since Carter was
Yeah.
president,
47 years, as they say. Yeah.
and he's I think I give him credit for doing something.
Mm-hmm.
I hope the plan is to actually make a regime change. That you're actually going to let them, you're going to get rid of all those people that were involved. It seems like most of them are dying off.
I know.
But the problem is America, as Americans, we sit there and say, well, how come it's not done yet? As if it's
Yes.
like baking a cake. This is going to take longer than a few hours.
It definitely is. And I can say for me, what concerns me though is I think I think we all agree that regime change is necessary, and not just for America's interest, but for the Iranian people.
Mhm.
Beyond that, though, the frustration is we haven't done so good historically with regime changes. And
Mhm.
so people are aware of this messaging now, the whole weapons of mass destruction lie with Iraq when we went there, and but it was a different time in the country. We were very much united after 9/11, and it is not that way today. So there is a major divide, and after the destruction that we've seen in Gaza, I think people are very leery that this could become catastrophic quickly. Iran is not just some joke of a Middle Eastern country, right? They're a big player. And although I want to believe what we're hearing as far as what we've done to obliterate their military capabilities and so on and so forth, what worries me is that if you're a nation in decline and your entire regime is about to change, what lengths will you not go to? And so they're talking about if we strike their power plants, then they're going to go after desalination plants. And this, I mean, again, this could just be catastrophic to not just Iran, but really the globe. And I think we're all feeling that right now. So at the end of the day, I would love to see success. I'm just not quite clear on what does success look like for America, because I think we all understand the argument for Israel,
Hmm.
but what is the argument for America? What makes it a win for America? Of course, there's the obvious, less terrorism threats and so on. You don't have to worry about them striking through proxies anymore, things like that. But what concerns me is I don't know that regime change is possible without boots on the ground. And a vast majority of the American public are very anti boots on the ground and another forever war. And you have Joe Kent, who resigned recently, right? So there's just a lot going on. If you could look into a crystal ball, how would you see this ending in a way that looks like success for America?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think you're exactly right. People, you know, when we talk about boots on the ground, it's not so much the initial surge.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, usually we're pretty good at that.
Mm.
The Marines, lead
Yeah.
the way and they
Mm-hmm.
tend to clear that place out pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is we're not good at being, military police
Right.
standing around.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the guys that have, been in those wars
Mm-hmm.
will say, well, they didn't let us do certain things. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that goes back to Vietnam even.
Mm.
They would tell them, okay, you capture something, then you retreat. Then
Mm-hmm.
you say, what are we doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think in Afghanistan and in Iraq, you
Mm-hmm.
have the same thing where they're
Mm-hmm.
just standing out there as targets.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the American people don't want soldiers being targets.
No.
So how do you do it? How do you take it down? You could put boots on the ground to do that,
Mm-hmm.
but how do you then police the area?
Mm-hmm.
And are you going to fall prey to the people like the Ayatollah or some other
Yeah.
religious leader,
The IRGC.
right?
Yeah.
Who, military, yeah, no
Yeah.
better.
Yeah.
And unless you can convert those people, and even
Mm-hmm.
then,
Mm-hmm.
you have to get a whole new military in there. So it's
Yes.
very difficult. And when they say UN forces, that tends to be us.
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't really work.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. I would hope that someone who's much brighter militarily has come
Yeah.
up with a better plan,
I know.
because that is the problem we run into.
Mm-hmm.
Neither side's good. We don't want terrorists all over the place,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and we don't want to be under the gun as we have for now.
Mm-hmm.
How
Mm-hmm.
many years?
Yeah.
But you know, if it was successful, I mean, imagine. I think if that happens, Trump has put himself into a position where he is one of the great presidents. If you reorganize the Middle East
Mm-hmm.
and our whole hemisphere with
Mm-hmm.
Venezuela and now
Mm-hmm.
Cuba,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, wow, that's a lot of work. That's
It is. It is. And that's my concern too, because, had we gone into this administration and everything sort of worked out in the way that people thought it would, because I think even people who voted for Trump, right, definitely didn't see us getting into wars based on things that he has said in the past, he himself being against going into Iran, right? So seeing all this unfolding for a Trump voter, obviously we know what the argument is. If you didn't vote for Trump, then it's like, see, I told you so. But for Trump voters in particular, we wanted to see the economy start booming. We wanted to see, the jobs coming back, et cetera, et cetera. The bottom line, the household, right? That's what we care about. And so when we see what's happening with oil prices because of this particular
Mhm.
strike, and to your point, the fact that true change isn't going to come in 4 weeks. It's going to take some time. It's just, what does that look like? And I think if I had to say what my biggest fear was, it is that Trump ran on so many amazing promises and things that I really just vehemently believed in, right? Closing the border, getting men out of women's sports, just this whole radicalization from fringe groups of people in this country and forgetting what the populace really cares about, what the populace really wants. And my concern is that if things don't go well, we're just in for another Biden Harris ticket in 4 years or 3 years and some change now, I should say. And that's what concerns me, is the unraveling of all the positive changes that are happening in the Maha movement and amongst many other things. And it's just the political ping pong, that again sort of worries me. I think when Trump first won the election, I felt like, okay, this is it. We're good for the next 8 years because he's going to make these things happen. He's an action taker. And now I just don't really know because this could go very well or it could go very poorly. And so only time will tell. Obviously, I think you and I both know that. But rather than being completely doom and gloom, since it is still early, what positive message do you think we could leave people with from what you've seen in your political experience, your legal experience, just the research you did for this book? Because my concern is he's going to continue to face more political persecution depending on how things do go with Iran. And so this may not even be the end. You might have to do a part two. But what's kind of a positive message or something you feel pretty good about right about now that we could leave people with before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think people, all of us, whether you're on the right or the left or,
Hmm.
that guy that swings in the middle.
Yep. Which there are
You
a
know,
lot of those
right.
people.
And, in some ways they aggravate me the most.
Pick a side. Is that what
Kind
you're
of,
saying? Yeah.
yes, because it's like they're pushed by any little thing.
Mm,
It's like gas prices go up. Okay, I'm on that side. You
mm,
know, I they have an illegal immigrant. Okay, now I'm back on that side.
yeah.
What do you have any principles, or you just
Yes.
flop it around?
That's a good point.
But I think the problem is we look at perfection from these administrations,
Hmm.
and you know we end up cheering on like they're somehow our favorite football team. When
Yeah,
in fact,
you're right.
we have to look at it and instead cheer for the country as a whole. If
Hmm.
these things, I would have said, let's not do Iran, let's not do Venezuela, let's do the economy down the road, maybe.
Yes.
And but you know, I understand the idea. Like, if militarily they think we have to do it now
Hmm.
because we have information you don't, which
Hmm.
they do have information I
Oh,
don't.
yeah. 100%.
But I think as people, we've decided we're on that team and we're cheering or we're moaning
Hmm.
rather than cheering for America. And I think
Yes.
it would be nice if we just cheered for America. Like, I want
Yes.
to say like the World Baseball Classic, but I think there were people who actually were mad
Yeah.
at the baseball players, and they were
Hmm.
mad
Hmm.
even with the hockey event.
Hmm.
And I'm like, why are you mad at the individual players? Just
Yeah.
they've got the jersey says USA. That's who we're sticking for. Let's cheer
Yes.
them on. And I think it should be the same way with our, after the election, we have an
Hmm.
election. Let's hope the president does well, whoever it
Yes.
is. Let's
Yes.
cheer him on. I mean, we can
Hmm.
criticize, but we have people criticizing every little thing, marching in the street over
Yeah.
I don't know what.
Yeah,
No,
I know.
no kings. It's like, well, we
Oh
don't have
my God.
kings. What are we
I
talking?
know. It's so ridiculous. But this is what I mean. People are so easily swayed. And when we've moved and when we are moving so far away from emphasis on family, community, faith, etc., like you said, what are your principles? People need something to cling to. They need some purpose. They need some passion. And most people are just paycheck players at work. And so they're going to work just to collect a paycheck. But outside of that, they need to find something to cling to. So it's some no king's protest, right? That they're standing at. And in their hearts, these aren't all bad people, right? They truly believe that
Yeah.
that is what Trump thinks he is. And maybe they can make a case for that. Of course, think it's silly, but I respect everybody's freedom of speech and right to peacefully protest. Um, but you hit the nail on the head. It is like, where are your principles at? And I do think that cheering for America is truly what is needed. And that is the perfect takeaway message is to remember we are all one nation under God. We are all 50 states in this country and our territories. And we are doing ourselves a disservice by continuing to battle one another. We can't do anything about who's in office. Trump is there. He's not going anywhere. And God forbid something happens to him, then JD is going to be in there and obviously Rubio. And so I think people really need to just take a step back, realize the sky isn't falling yet, but understand that there are people in positions right now, to your point, that have information that you and I don't. It's fun to speculate, but these are people's lives. People do feel like this is the fate of our empire, right? and what is going to happen next. And nobody likes sitting in discomfort. But all we can do is hope for the best. And I do love that we should all be cheering for America. The reality is we do have men and women out there right now that are doing their damnedest to keep us safe and get this thing done, hopefully quickly and cleanly if we can. Although, like I said, I don't see that happening. I don't see regime change without boots on the ground. Time will tell. But remembering that those people are putting their lives on the line for us, and it's important that back here at home that we do root for home team. And if you don't like what you're seeing now, you have the ability to get out and vote in the next election. And also remember your local communities while you're at it.
Exactly.
Well, Dennis, this has actually been so much fun, really informative. I just love your take, love your perspective, your story. It's just kind of an all-time American story growing up out in the Chicago area and just hearing your door-to-door knocking with your dad. And it's very nostalgic. I love it. And thank you so much for sharing. The book is DC Swamp Strikes Back, Aaron Burr, Donald Trump, and their similar battles. This is available on Amazon, and you can also get it, I think, on Barnes & Noble, you said?
Yes.
Okay. And is there anywhere else that you'd like to plug? Anywhere where people can follow you, see what you're working on, hear from you?
Not right now. I've been redoing the website and talking about a podcast, but we haven't really put it together yet.
Awesome. Well, keep us posted. Happy to promote that for you whenever you get that up and running.
Thank you.
And I definitely appreciate the time. Once again, hopefully we will meet again soon. This was very informative. I hope everybody gets the book and gets that little history lesson. And remember, everybody, if you're not already doing so, please like, share, and subscribe to What a Fustercluck, available on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Dennis Brennan, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.